On the shelf at the hobby shop, they sat side by side. Same size box, same promise on the front. One of them said, Cox .049. If you were 9 years old with 1 week of allowance, you took one home and left the other one sitting right there. The engine left behind came off a line running up to 6,000 a day, and it carried a 3-year guarantee. Every brand that shared that shelf with the Cox is gone now. The one that went home is still running, and the reason is not inside the engine. Both of those engines are on a workbench in this film, side by side, the way they used to sit on the shelf. Nothing about them says which one won. They are the same class of machine, the same half-A displacement, a cylinder smaller than a thimble. They burn the same fuel and they turn the same propellers. This channel spends all of its time on exactly this, the small American machines, and the reason a few of them are still here when the rest are not. If that is your kind of story, subscribing is what keeps them coming. The silver one on the right is the Cox. Tens of millions were built, and a country never quite threw them away, which is why this channel keeps finding new stories inside them. The one on the left is a wen-mac, a little heavier in the hand because of the steel starter coiled on top of it. Most people watching this have never heard the name. And that is strange, because for a while, the company behind it was bigger, faster, and better equipped than Cox was. It did not lose on the bench. It did not lose in the air. Where it lost is stamped into the metal itself, and it takes the whole of this film to read it. The first place to look is the price tag, $3.95. That is what a Cox Babe B cost in 1956, and everyone remembers the number because it looked like a mistake. So the easy story writes itself. Cox won because Cox was cheap. The rivals charged more, the kids bought cheap, the end. Except the record says otherwise. The OK Cub, an older, respected engine out of New York, sold for $4.95. By the middle of 1958, its maker had cut the price to $3.95 exactly. Not close to the Cox number. The Cox number. How a toy company forced that surrender is a film this channel has already made. Here is what matters for this one. The price war happened, and the rivals still died. Matching the number did not save a single one of them. Their engines made more power on paper. Their tolerances, by their own accounts, matched. Their warranty was 3 times longer. So what killed them? That question has a wrong answer and a right answer. The wrong one comes first because it teaches something. The wrong answer is that Cox slashed prices to strangle everyone else. It sounds right. It is what big companies do. But there is a single sentence buried in the hobby's own trade history that almost nobody quotes, and it changes the picture. The selling margin on all Cox products was roughly constant. What you paid was directly related to what it cost to make. Cox never cut its margin to win. $3.95 was not a weapon someone aimed. It was simply what the engine cost to build. At a factory turning out more than 1 million of them a year, plus the same steady markup as everything else in the catalog, which quietly rewrites the rule. In a fight like this, price is not a strategy. Price is a result. It is the shadow that a production system throws on the shelf. And that means the real fight was never on the price tag. It was inside the buildings. So the next place to look is inside the engines themselves, starting with the valve. Turned around, the Cox shows almost nothing. A flat plate at the back of the case, and behind it a sliver of spring steel, thinner than a razor blade, that flutters open and shut hundreds of times a second. That is the entire intake system. It has one moving part, and that part has no shaft, no gear, and no bearing surface to wear. The cylinder above it is a single piece of machined steel. Fewer parts, fewer operations, fewer things a child could break. The rival engines went the other way. Their intake ran through a rotary valve at the front, a rotating drum with passages cut through it, timed to the crankshaft. On a bench, run by an adult, it is an elegant piece of engineering. Period reviewers admired it. But every extra surface is an extra place to seize, and every extra part is an extra penny, multiplied by every engine that comes off the line. Simple was not the crude choice. Simple was the expensive to design, cheap to build, hard to kill choice. And the man who drew that rival engine understood all of this perfectly, because designing engines was the whole of his life. His name was Bill Atwood. The Academy of Model Aeronautics keeps a file on him, and the file does not hedge. One of the most prolific model engine designers of all time. A racer, a record holder, a man who ended up in 2 halls of fame. When wen-mac needed a .049 of their own, they did not hire a kid out of school. They went to Atwood, and Atwood was not their employee. He was an outside master, a supplier with his own company, and the wen-mac .049 was built under his roof. Even the spring starter that became wen-mac's signature is credited in that same file as his innovation. The engine was his, the name on it was not, and the work was good from the start. As early as 1953, the hobby magazines had his wen-mac .049 on the test bench. Airtrails clocked it at 16,000 RPM and wrote the little Culver City engine up with respect. This was not a toy company guessing at engineering. This was a master's engine in a toy maker's box. What he thought about that arrangement, nobody recorded. No interview from those years survives. No letter. The file keeps his drawings, his engines, and his results, and almost nothing of his voice. Where the record is silent, this film stays silent too. What the record does keep is what his customer did with his work. Because on paper, the company selling his engine was about to outbuild, outpromise, and outmuscle Cox in every direction at once. The scale comes first. A hobby club historian who traced the company puts the line at up to 6,000 engines a day by 1964. A British engine columnist, writing at the time, said production ran not far short of 5,000. 2 counts, 1 order of magnitude, thousands of engines every single day, from a company most people today have never heard of. And the reach ran past America. Across the Atlantic, one wen-mac model went on sale as, in a British columnist's words, the cheapest model engine ever offered on the UK market. While Cox was conquering the American 5 and dime, the rival was underpricing an entire second country. Then, the promise. A 3-year guarantee on a toy engine, in an era when most toy warranties expired around the time the wrapping paper hit the floor. That is not marketing fluff. A period reviewer singled it out because nobody else in the business dared offer it. And the guarantee was not bluff, because behind it sat a testing regime that would embarrass some full-size engine plants. By the club historian's account, 300 engines out of every production lot, a 15% sample, were pulled off the line and test run before the lot could ship. Some of them were run 8 hours a day for as long as 30 days straight. A toy, tortured like an aircraft part. Then the muscle. Years later, collectors put the rival's last reed valve engine on a bench next to the Cox Black Widow, and by their numbers, the rival made more torque, higher in the range. On the test stand, the losing side wins. More engines, longer warranty, harder testing, more power. Every box a buyer could check, checked. If this were a fight between machines, it is over, and the Cox lost it. So the fight must have been happening somewhere else. And the clearest window into where sits on top of the rival engine. That little spring starter. This is United States patent number 2,946,327. Toy engine starting device. Filed in May of 1957. Granted in July of 1960. Assigned to the wen-mac Corporation. It is a real document, and it is quietly funny. The inventor explains, in patent language, why the old pull cord had to go. Careless or thoughtless persons, it says, would yank the cord with excessive force, breaking it, or yanking the toy clean out of the other hand. Anyone who is ever 9 years old can confirm the research. So the spring starter was the fix, introduced in 1957, protected in 1960. From that summer on, wen-mac held enforceable rights on the idea. And here the story turns, on Cox. Collector accounts agree on the outline. Cox brought out its own version of that starter. A letter arrived from the rival's side demanding they stop. And Cox withdrew the model after about a year on the market. No court record of it has ever surfaced. This film went looking. What survives is the patent, which is real, and the memory of the men who sold the engines. That is what can be said, and this film will not say more than that. But notice what it means. The giant of this story spent a year as the imitator, caught borrowing from the company it would outlive. Whatever decided this war, it was not that one side played fair and the other did not. Here is something very few people ever did, because nobody buys two rival engines to compare their undersides. On the shelf, in the early 1960s, a boy could choose between a wen-mac and a McCoy. 2 names, 2 boxes, 2 loyalties. Collectors who finally set them side by side decades later found what the boxes never said. A McCoy No. 1 and a wen-mac Mark 12 are, in their words, pretty much identical. Same castings, same bones, 2 rivals, 1 machine. That is a rule worth keeping far beyond the hobby shop. 2 competitors on a shelf are not always 2 companies. Sometimes they are 1 factory wearing 2 masks. But masks do not put themselves on. If the same engine was being sold under 2 names, then somewhere above the factory floor, someone owned both names and was shuffling them. Which finally brings this story to the company that actually decides it. Not Cox, not wen-mac. A company that never machined a cylinder in its life. American Machine and Foundry, AMF. A conglomerate, a company whose product was owning other companies. Bowling equipment, sporting goods. And around 1959 and 1960, a small maker of toy airplane engines in Los Angeles. The trade press reported the deal. The financial manuals record the price, a block of AMF stock. By 1961, the directories list wen-mac plainly, a wholly owned subsidiary. What wen-mac was before that matters here. 2 brothers, the McRoskys, had built it out of a plastic shop. Their idea was bigger than an engine, a powered airplane a family could buy finished in a department store and fly the same afternoon. By 1955, a Firestone store would sell a complete wen-mac airplane, engine, controls, everything, for $9.95. The Saturday Evening Post carried the ads at Christmas. The word "wen" in the name was a partner from the earliest days. The rest was the brothers' own. It was, in the oldest sense, a family firm, the kind where the name on the box and the name on the office door were the same name. To AMF, none of that was the point. The point was a product line that fit a portfolio. A toy engine was a line item, a thing the accountants called inventory, and the brothers had called their name. Nothing dramatic happened. No fire, no scandal, no collapse. The machines kept running, and that is what makes this part of the story hard to see. From the outside, nothing was wrong. The damage only shows up somewhere small, somewhere nobody would think to look, the underside of the engine. Lined up by year, the engines read like a ledger of what the company stamped on them. First, wen-mac Corporation, a firm with 2 brothers' name on the door. Then, a division of American Machine and Foundry. The same machine, now a branch on someone's org chart. Then, the letters move in front. AMF wen-mac. The family name demoted to a model designation. And then, in 1968, it is not even that. AMF sold the operation to the Testor Corporation, the paint and hobby company, and the wen-mac name went away entirely. The engines that remained went out wearing the McCoy label instead. 4 names, 9 years. And underneath the stamping, by every account that survives, the machine itself barely changed at all. There is even a receipt for that. In 1969, the British columnist testing the McCoy-branded engine noted that its spring starter was a development of the one wen-mac had originated back in the early 50s. Same idea, still working, a decade and 3 owners later. The invention outlived the inventor's name. That is the answer hiding in plain sight. The question of this film was, what killed the engine built to beat the Cox? Nothing killed the engine. The engine was fine. What died 4 times was the name. And a name, it turns out, is not packaging. A name is the thing a buyer trusts, a dealer stocks, a boy asks for at Christmas. Nobody at any of those companies did anything wrong. Every sale made sense. That is what makes it worth staring at. The same test, run on the winner, comes back different. Cox, founded by one man in the mid-1940s. Same owner, same California factory, same name on the box, for some 24 years, until he sold the company in 1969. After the war for the .049 was already won. While the rival's identity changed hands 4 times, a Cox box meant the same thing in 1968 that it meant in 1956. Same promise. Same Santa Ana address on the instruction sheet. Same name a father remembered from the last one he bought. And that constancy compounds in ways no spec sheet captures. A dealer reordered the brand that never surprised him. A parent replaced a lost engine with the name they already trusted. A boy who outgrew his first Cox asked for a bigger Cox. Every year, the name stayed put. It was quietly collecting interest, while the rival's name was being spent, split, and reissued by owners who had never machined anything. That is the one box the spec sheet never listed, and the only one the rivals could not check. For a moment, it is worth standing where the losers stood. The brothers built something real. The engineers built engines good enough to win. None of them failed at their jobs. Their company simply stopped being theirs, one signature at a time. They deserved better than a footnote. But the machines they built are still here. Most of them, cleaned and fueled, will still run. And the fairest way to honor the people who made them is to say plainly what beat them, because it was not the metal. It was that the other side never had to explain who it was. One more record sits in the Atwood file, and it lands like the verdict of the whole war. Right around the time the conglomerate bought his customer, in either 1959 or 1960, according to the file, Bill Atwood went to work for Cox. The man who drew the engine built to beat the Cox .049 spent the rest of his career designing for Cox. Not one project, not a consultation. The rest of his working life. And his first great work there became a legend of its own. The TD series, the engines that turned a $3 toy company into the performance name of the entire hobby. This channel has already told the story of what a TD could do. Nothing faster ever wore the Cox label. All his career, his engines had worn someone else's name, a name that kept being sold out from under his work. This time, the name on the engine was one he could stay beside. And he did. People follow what companies cannot fake. The brothers lost their name to a portfolio. The engineers lost their badge to a paint company. And the best designer in the fight walked across the street to the one door that still had the same sign over it. The engines never chose a winner. The people did. The hobby shop shelf is a memory now, but the choice it offered is still sitting in drawers all over America. The engine that stayed behind on that shelf was not the worst machine. It may have been the better one. It had the bigger factory, the longer promise, the harder numbers, everything except an owner who kept its name. So here is the rule this whole war leaves behind, and it is worth more than any engine. The thing that survives is not the best thing. It is the thing nobody renamed. In machines, in companies, in most things a person builds, what lasts is what keeps its identity long enough to be trusted. If there is a Cox .049 in a drawer in your house, that is the reason it is there. Not because it beat anything on a bench. Because through every Christmas of your childhood, It never had to introduce itself twice. And if the engine in your drawer says wen-mac or McCoy, you are holding the rarer story. The one that had everything, except the one thing. Either way, it is probably still capable of running. Its rivals are gone. The little machines themselves never surrendered anything. Some of you still have one. That is not a guess. The two films beside this one walk through the winner's side of the story. The factory that built 1 million engines a year, and the fastest engine that ever wore the name. The Last Whistle tells the true stories of America's vanished hobby brands, researched from the primary record. Subscribing is how the next one finds you.